Hey everyone, Mr. Voikin here. This is lesson 1.4 and we're going to be taking a look at decimals and how to use them in our calculations. So as it says right here, a decimal separates the place values that are greater than 1 from those that are less than 1. So if we look at the example down below, this is 34 point. So this is the decimal and it's often read out as 34.73. You could also say 34.73, but more commonly we refer to this as the point. Now, when we look at this, we know that the 3 is in the tens column, the 4 is in the ones column, the 7 is in the tenths column, and the 3 is in the hundredths column. So everything to the right of the decimal is going to be values that are less than 1. So for example, the 7, the 0.7, the 0.7, the tenths position, that can be written as 7 over 10. And the 3, which is in the hundredths position, can be written as 3 over 100. So to expand this number out, it would be 30 plus 4 plus 7 over 10 plus 3 over 100. Okay, so that's how we expand a decimal number. And we're now going to take a look at how to change a decimal into a fraction. Okay, so if you notice right here that this 0.8, the decimal, the number to the right of the decimal, again, is in the tenths column. And so basically, this is going to be 8 over 10. Now, if I was to take a calculator and go 8 divided by 10, it would revert back to 0.8. Okay, now the one thing we have to do every time we create an answer or come up with an answer that is in fractional form is we need to check that it is in lowest terms. Okay, so 8 over 10, I can divide 8 by 2 and the 10 by 2. So remember, whatever I do to the numerator, which is the top number, so this is our numerator, and whatever I do to the bottom number, which is our denominator, it has to be the same. So in this case, I'm dividing both the numerator and the denominator by 2 because that number 2 can divide in there evenly. So what we end up with is that this is equal to 4 over 5. And that would be our final answer. Okay, now let's take a look at example number 2. We have 3.75. Okay, now because this last digit right here is in the hundredths column, okay, then what we're going to have to do is put our answer over 100. So the hundredths, that becomes our denominator. So we ignore the decimal in this place, just like we did on the other one. It says 0.8, but we put 8 over 10. Our denominator in this case is 100, and we're just going to put 375 over 100. So again, is this in lowest terms? Well, if you understand the divisibility rules, you should be able to look at that and immediately recognize that we can divide 5 into both of these. So if I divide the numerator by 5 and the denominator by 5, we're going to end up with 75 over 20. And again, I can do that one more time. So I was able to divide by 5 on the first step, and now I'm doing it again. So I probably could have divided 25 into the original one, but it's hard to see that. It's harder to see those larger numbers that divide in, and sometimes it may take you more steps, but the goal is to get to the lowest terms in the end. So 75 divided by 5 is 15, and 20 divided by 5 is 4, and that is in lowest terms. Now, this one right here is called a improper fraction, and it's an improper fraction because the numerator is larger than the denominator. Now, if you're asked to express this as a mixed fraction, then we would be able to convert this to a mixed fraction, and the answer for that is going to be 3 and 3/4. Now, later on, we're going to have a lesson on fractions, so for now, just realize that we have this version up top, which is a improper fraction. This one that we first did is called a proper fraction, and what I converted to right here is called a mixed fraction. Okay, so let's take a look at adding and subtracting numbers that have decimals. So like I stated right here, to add numbers with decimal, it is best to align. So we need to align the numbers. Forgot a B in there, so let's put the B back in there. Align the numbers vertically, okay, and ensure that the decimals line up. So that's important. So the way we see it right here, these are aligned horizontally, which means side to side. So like I said, what do we want to do when we're adding or subtracting? We want to take these numbers and we want to align them vertically. So I'm going to take 36.4, and underneath that, remembering to line up those decimals. So it's really important that we keep this decimal in the exact same spot. So I've got a 5.63. Now you can see that right here, we don't have a number above the 3, and if there's nothing there, I can just put a 0 into here. Now, the operation that we're doing is adding, so we are going to add these numbers. So I start on the far right, and I say 0 plus 3 is 3, 4 plus 6 is 10. So I put the 0 on the bottom, carry the 1 over to the next column. Don't forget to bring that decimal down. So that's really important. I need to bring the decimal down and line it up in the same spot. Now, in this next column, I have 1 plus 6, which is 7, plus 5, which is 12. So I put the last digit of that number down below and carry the 1 up top. And a 1 plus 3 is a 4. So the answer to this is 42.03. Okay, so we're going to do another example right here, and basically what we've got is a number that's just we're going to have 3 numbers we're going to adding together rather than 2. Okay, so again, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to put our numbers down, align the decimals, so this is 3.6, and I have this right here with a 105 and 1, 2, 3, like that. So 105.04 plus 3.6 plus 2000.105. Remember, we're going to be adding these together, and because there's no numbers in these positions right here, I can put zeros in there, but I can also just leave it empty and just realize that there is a 0 there. So what's important again is that I remain, sort of in these columns like this, and I line the numbers up perfectly, because if I have them shifted left and right, I'm going to do some calculations with numbers in the incorrect columns. So on the far right, I've only got a 5 right there. In the next one, we've got 4 plus 0, which is 4. In the next column, I've got a 6 plus 1, which is 7. Don't forget to put the decimal down there. Moving along, we got 5 plus 3, which is 8. 0 plus 0 is 0. 1 plus 0 is 1. And finally, in the furthest left column, we have a 2. So the answer to this is 2,108.745. Okay, now we're going to do a third example, and this time we're going to do some subtraction. So you can see we have 14 minus 6.04. So again, it's good to align these vertically. So it's 14. Now in this case, there is no decimal that is written down, but we know that it's at the end of that. And I can now put as many zeros as I want after this. It doesn't change this answer or this number. So I'm going to be subtracting, again, don't forget to line up the decimals, 6.04. So in this case, really, all these other zeros right here are unnecessary. Now, we're going to subtract this, and if I look 0 minus 4, I can't really do that. I have to have a number that is greater than 4 that is up top here. So I'm going to have to borrow from this one, but there's nothing there, so I'm going to have to borrow from that one and bring it here. Okay, so this one right here is, I'm going to cross that out, and that's going to become a 3, and I'm going to borrow 1 and put it right there. So I now have a 10 in this column, but I'm going to have to borrow one of those from the 10 and bring it over to this last column so I can do some subtraction there. So again, what I'm going to need to do is cross this one out. 10 becomes 1 less, which is 9, and I put a 1 over that 0, so I have a 10 there. Now I can start doing some subtraction. So in this first column right here, I've got 10 minus 4, which is 6. In the second column right here, the 10th column, I have 9 minus 0, which is 9. Don't forget to bring that decimal down. And now what I've got up top is, like in this column, I've got a 3 minus 6, but I can't do that, so I'm going to have to borrow from the column to the left, which is really going to make this 13. So I've got 13 minus 6, which is going to be 7. Okay, so the answer to this subtraction question is 7.96. Now, if I head back to the addition section right here, these numbers right here that we added together, these are called the addends. And this number right here, our answer, is called the sum. So with addition, we have addends and the sum. And with this last one that we did, the subtraction, what we've got is a top one, which is called the minuend. The one that's being subtracted from that, which is the subtrahend. And the answer to a subtraction question is called the difference. Now, normally what we really want to focus on is that the word difference is the answer to a subtraction question, and the word sum is the answer to an addition question. Okay, next we're going to take a look at multiplying numbers with decimals. So in this case, we've got 4.7 times 3.2. So again, what you want to do is you want to take these numbers and just line them up like so. 4.7 times 3.2. Now in this case, the decimals line up, but with multiplication, it's not necessary to line up these decimals. Okay, we're better to keep the numbers sort of shifted to the right. Now, this is just, what you want to do in this case is just ignore the decimals right now. So right now, we're just going to pretend that those decimals are not there, and we're just going to do multiplication, assuming that this is 47 times 32. So I start right here, and I say 2 times 7 is 14, carry up the 1, 2 times 4 is 8, plus that 1 is 9. Because I'm moving to the 3, which is in the tens column, I need to put a 0 down below. 3 times 7 is 21. Now I'm going to need to bring up a 2. And 4 times 3 is 12, plus that 2 is 14. Now what I need to do is add these two together. I get 4, 0, 5, and 1. Now the answer is not 1,504. What I need to do is take a look at these two numbers that I multiplied together. And these two numbers right here are called factors. So these are the numbers, these are the factors that I multiplied to get my answer, which is called the product. So again, knowing that the answer to a multiplication question is called the product is going to be important. Now in the factors, how many numbers are behind the decimal? Well, I have 2 numbers that are behind the decimals. So in my answer, I'm going to need 2 numbers also behind the decimal. So my decimal number is going to go right there. So the answer to this question, the product, is 15.04. Okay, so let's move on to example number 2. Again, I have 18.6 times 5. Now, don't forget that 5 actually has a decimal right there, but if there's a bunch of zeros there, remember it doesn't change anything, so we don't really worry about that at all. I'm just going to do the same thing, though. I'm just going to stack 18.6 times 5. And like I said, notice that I've justified my numbers all the way to the right. So now I just do basic multiplication, ignoring the decimal. So this is just like multiplying 186 times 5. So 6 times 5 is 30, carry up the 3. 5 times 8 is 40, plus the 3 is 43, carry up the 4. 5 times 1 is 5, plus the 4 is 9. So 930 is not the answer because we have 1 number behind the decimal place. So I'm going to need in my answer 1 number behind the decimal place. So my decimal is going to go right there. So the answer is 93.0, but remember any 0 that's all alone to the right side does not change the value. Okay, so, or the answer can be written as just 93. Okay, finally we're on to dividing numbers with decimals, and before I read to you what's in red right there, we need to take a look at the first example question, and we need to get some terms down. So the first number, 5.6, this is called the dividend. Now, the number that's being divided into that is called the divisor. And if we move back to our definition and the red sentence there that's explaining what to do when dividing numbers with decimals, we now understand what a divisor is. So what does it say? When dividing numbers with decimals, convert the divisor to a whole number. So right now, the divisor is not a whole number. It is 0.8. So what do we need to do? We need to move this decimal 1 place to the right. And that will create the number 8 point, or just 8. Okay, now how do I move a decimal to the right? It's by multiplying that decimal number by 10. Now, if I multiply one number by 10, I have to multiply everything by 10. And remember, it's really easy. What does that do? It just moves the decimal 1 place to the right. So basically, this can be rewritten as 56 divided by 8. Okay, now the way we're going to set this up is, well, in this case, you should actually be able to see that 56 divided by 8 equals 7. But if the numbers were a little bit larger and you weren't allowed to use a calculator, it's going to be set up like this. 8 goes into 56 and 7 times. Now, what is the number 7? The number 7 is called the quotient. Okay, so we're going to do one more question right here, one more example with division. So again, we want to take a look at our divisor, and the divisor is right here, 1.2. So is it a whole number? No, it has a decimal. So what am I going to do? Well, again, I need to move that 1 place to the right, so that's going to be times 10, which means I'm going to multiply this one times 10, which is going to move that one position to the right. So this is now going to read 6.24 divided by 12. Okay, now this one's a little bit harder to do in your head, so we would set it up like so, 6.24. Now what we want to do is move that decimal up to the top before we start doing anything, so it's right there. Okay, and I want to say, can I divide the number 12 into 6? Well, the answer is no. 6 is smaller than 12. It cannot divide into there. So right here, it doesn't divide into there, so it's going to be a 0. So now what I need to do is take a look at the two numbers. Does 12 divide into 62? Well, yes, it does. It goes in there 5 times. What is 5 times 12? It is 60. Now what I need to do is I need to take 62 and subtract 60 from it, and I'm left with 2. Then I need to bring this 4 down and place it right there. So now I'm checking to see if 12 will divide into 24, and you can see it does. It divides in there 2 times. So the answer is 2. 2 times 12 is 24, and our remainder here is 0, so we are done. So the answer to this question is 0.52. Okay, now the last thing we need to do is look at rounding numbers with decimals. So sometimes you may have infinite decimals in the case of a non-terminating decimal or a repeating decimal. And sometimes there just might be too many that are needed for the purpose that you are doing the calculation. So let's take a look at the first one. It says round to the whole number. So the whole number is the sort of ones column. Okay, so that's this first number that is on the left side of the decimal. So what we always want to do is take a look at the number to the right of that, which is going to be 6, 4, and 5 in this case. So if it happens to be a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, there is no change to the number that's to the left. If this number that's underlined is a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, then the number to the left is going to go up 1. It's going to increase by 1. So if we take a look at the first example, 0.68, well, I take a look at the 6. It is in this section right here, so that means this number right here, the 0, is going to have to increase by 1. So my answer is going to be 1. The 0 went up 1. Okay, so let's take a look at the next one. We have 111.41. What we're going to be looking at is the 4, which falls into this column. So it says there is no change to this ones column. So my answer is going to be 1, 1, 1. And the last one right here, we have a 5, which tells me that this one is going to go up 1. So my answer is going to be 14. Now, sometimes it might say, well, round it to the first decimal place. So the first decimal place means there. That's going to be the last number that we're going to want to see in our answer. And so remember, we want to look to the right of that. So the first decimal place is called the tenths. Okay, so following the same rules as before, if I look at this number 31.564, remember the 4 here, it doesn't even come into play, the 3 doesn't come into play, and this 9 doesn't come into play right here. So 6 tells me that the number to the left of it is going to go up by 1, so the answer to this is going to be 31.6. The 4 in 18.14 tells me there will be no change, so the answer is going to be 18.1. And in the last one, we have 112.00. So in this case, it's not going to go up again because 0 tells me there's no change. So the answer is going to be 112.0. Okay, and let's move to the last one, the last 3 examples of this lesson. It says round to the nearest hundredth, and the nearest hundredth is going to be 2 decimal places. So 2 decimal places means I'm rounding to that position right there. So what do I have to do? Look at the number to the right of that. And when I have 16.108, the 8 tells me that that 0 will increase by 1. So my answer is 16.11. Now this next one is a little bit tricky because the 9 tells me that that 9 to the left of it is going to go up by 1. So it's going to become 10, but you can't put a 10 in this column. So it's going to bump the other one up, which is going to become 10, which will bump the other one up. So it actually ends up sort of, this one bumps up that one, which bumps up that one, which bumps up that one. And we actually end up with 5,001. Now, we're supposed to have 2 decimal places here, and they would just end up being zeros. So this one right here is a little bit tricky for students sometimes to understand. Okay, and let's look at the last one. So the fact that it's negative doesn't really change anything, but just make sure that in your answer you include that negative sign there. And this one tells the 1 says the 7 is not going to change, so we have negative 63.47. So there we go. That is the end of this lesson, but wait. As an added bonus, I want you to answer this question. So what is 3.1 times 2.2? So you do the work, you figure it out, bring it in on a small piece of paper, make sure you put your name on it, give it to me, and if you get the correct answer, you will get a nice little treat in class. Thank you, Mr. Voikin. See you next class. Bye-bye.